The alarm started at 2:47 in the morning. Not the kind that wakes you gently. The kind that means something expensive just broke in a way that can't be fixed. Dr. Chen didn't run. Running implied panic, and panic implied liability. She walked quickly through the R&D wing of Vaught's New Jersey facility, her clearance badge bouncing against her sternum. The fluorescent lights hummed their usual frequency. The air still smelled like recycled oxygen and industrial cleaner. Everything normal except for the 18 missed calls on her phone and the fact that her entire particle acceleration team was standing in the observation room, staring at a hole. Not a hole in the wall, not a hole in the equipment, a hole in the air. It looked like someone had taken a knife to reality and cut a clean vertical line, 8 feet tall, crackling with light that shouldn't exist, according to any model they'd been using. Chen pulled up the last 30 minutes of data logs on the nearest terminal. The Compound V variant integration test had been running nominal. Nominal right up until the energy readings spiked into ranges that the system flagged as instrument error. Except the instruments were fine. "Ma'am," the security lead touched her elbow. "We need to evacuate the wing." Chen didn't look away from the rift. "Has anyone contacted Vought Tower?" They're already en route. Of course they were. Vought didn't sleep. Vought had crisis teams staged in 3 states specifically for situations that weren't supposed to happen. She'd signed an NDA thick enough to stop a bullet. But even the NDA couldn't have predicted this. The rift pulsed once, twice. Then something stepped through. Not stepped. Emerged. Arrived. The vocabulary didn't exist for what she was watching. One moment the rift was empty. The next moment there was a man standing in the center of the lab, and the rift sealed itself behind him like a wound closing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair, clean features, wearing a costume that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd read the word hero in a dictionary and decided to make it literal. Blue and red cape included the whole package. He stood perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds, taking in the lab, the equipment, the people frozen behind reinforced glass. Then he looked directly at the observation window. Directly at Chen. His eyes glowed faintly. Not the harsh laser red of Homelander's gaze. Something warmer. Solar. Fascinating, Chen said, because her brain was still trying to process this as data instead of catastrophe. The man in blue and red tilted his head slightly, then lifted off the ground without any visible effort and floated toward the exit. Not flying in the way Vaught's promotional materials showed soups flying all thrust and drama. Just moving through space like gravity was a suggestion he'd politely declined. The reinforced door, rated to contain a Compound 5 incident, crumpled like tissue paper when he touched it. Chen reached for her phone. It was already ringing. Ashley Barrett's name on the screen. "Dr. Chen." Barrett's voice carried the kind of calm that only came from swallowing panic for a living. "I need you to tell me that what I'm seeing on the security feed is some kind of equipment malfunction." "I can't tell you that." "Then I need you to keep everyone in that facility away from windows and cameras until we have a team on site. We're 10 minutes out." "He's already leaving." A pause. Brief, controlled. "Leaving how?" "Through the north wall. He didn't use the door." Another pause, longer this time. Chen could hear voices in the background. Multiple phones, the sound of Vaught's machinery spinning up to contain something that had just become everyone's problem. "Dr. Chen," Barrett said. "Nobody sees this. Nobody talks about this. Standard protocol." The call ended. Chen looked at her team. They were still staring at the space where the rift had been, where a man who shouldn't exist had simply arrived and departed like this was all perfectly routine. She thought about the energy readings, about the way the rift had closed, about the casual ease with which he'd demolished a door designed to hold back worse things than people. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "NDA amendment incoming. Sign immediately." Chen put her phone in her pocket and started writing her resignation letter in her head. "Yam talk says." Metro Man had been falling through the space between spaces for what felt like no time and all time, simultaneously, when he landed on something solid, not landed, arrived. The distinction mattered even if the vocabulary didn't quite work. He stood in a room full of equipment he didn't recognize, surrounded by people in lab coats staring at him through thick glass. The air smelled wrong, tasted wrong. This wasn't Metro City. The architecture was different. The technology signature was different. Even the ambient anxiety radiating off the scientists felt different, sharper somehow, more corporate. He'd been through something like this before. Not exactly like this, but close enough that the shape of it was familiar. A rift, a tear. Something that shouldn't have been possible becoming temporarily inevitable because someone had pushed too hard at the walls of what was allowed. The scientists weren't attacking, weren't even trying to contain him. They were just watching, recording, documenting. He could see it in their posture, hear it in the way they moved. They'd been trained for incidents, not interventions. He could hear voices now coming from outside the lab. Not just voices. Helicopters, vehicles, a lot of them arriving fast. Metro Man had been in enough laboratories, enough underground facilities, enough secret projects to recognize the smell. Compound V. He didn't know what it was called here, but he could taste it in the air. Something chemical. Something that changed people. He moved toward the exit. Not because he was in a hurry, but because waiting meant letting them set the terms. The door crumpled when he pushed it. Not because he was trying to destroy it. Just because it was in the way, and he was done waiting for permission. The hallway beyond was empty. Evacuated. Smart. He followed the exit signs, moving at a pace that was neither fast nor slow. Just deliberate. Purposeful. The kind of movement that said he knew exactly where he was going, even if that was technically a lie. He could hear them now. Outside. Vehicles had formed a perimeter. Armed personnel probably, though, they'd realize soon enough that arms didn't matter. He'd lived through that realization dozens of times. The moment when people understood that all their carefully prepared contingencies were just theater. Metro Man walked through the north wall because it was the most direct route. The concrete parted like water, structural steel bending aside without protest. He stepped out into the New Jersey night and looked up at the sky. Wrong stars, wrong moon, wrong everything. He'd crossed into somewhere else. Not just somewhere geographically different. Somewhere fundamentally different. A parallel space where the rules were similar, but not identical. He could feel it in the air, taste it in the ambient energy. This place ran on systems adjacent to his own, but not quite the same. The vehicles were closing in. Black SUVs, unmarked but clearly coordinated. He could hear their radios, their encrypted chatter, the organized chaos of a response team that had done this before. Not this exact situation, but close enough. Metro Man stood in the parking lot and waited. Not because he couldn't leave. He could be gone before they finished surrounding him. Could be anywhere in this new world before they processed the fact that he'd moved. But leaving meant not understanding, and understanding meant knowing what kind of trap he'd fallen into. The SUVs formed a loose circle. Doors opened. People emerged, but not soldiers. These were handlers. Corporate types in dark suits with earpieces and the kind of posture that came from managing expensive assets instead of fighting them. One of them stepped forward. Blonde? Professional? Earpiece in one earphone pressed to the other, juggling two conversations while an assistant with a legal pad hovered at her shoulder, whispering corrections. "Good evening," she said, into the space between phone calls. Her voice perfectly calibrated for someone who was absolutely not having a good evening. "My name is Ashley Barrett. I represent Vought International. I'm hoping we can discuss what just happened without anyone getting hurt." Metro Man looked at her. then at the tablet, then at the small army of support personnel hanging back at a respectful distance, cameras ready legal team probably already drafting the paperwork. He'd seen this dance before. Different city, different organization, same essential choreography. "I'm not interested in being managed," he said. Stillwell's smile didn't waver. "Of course not. We're simply hoping to facilitate a conversation about your situation. You're clearly not from around here, and I imagine you have questions. We have resources, information. We can help you understand where you are and what your options might be." Options. The word hung in the air like a trap that hadn't been set yet, but would be given time. "You have cameras," Metro Man said. "Lots of them. You mobilized in under 10 minutes. You have contingency teams for situations like this. That's not normal emergency response. That's management infrastructure." Barrett's expression shifted slightly. Became something more genuine, or at least a better simulation of it. "You're observant." "Yes, we specialize in managing unique individuals. Vought International has decades of experience working with enhanced persons. We provide support resources, public relations. We turn complicated situations into opportunities." Opportunities for who? Everyone involved. Metro Man looked past her at the facility he'd just walked out of. At the equipment inside that had been trying to do something with energy and compounds and variants. At the corporate logo on every vehicle, every uniform, every piece of equipment in sight. Vought International. Not a government agency, not a research institution. A company. A corporation with the resources to contain incidents and the infrastructure to package them. He'd left one cage, landed in another. "I'm not interested," he said again. Barrett gestured toward Manhattan's distant skyline visible across the water. The assistant beside her was already typing notes. "Before you make any decisions, why don't you come into the city? Let us show you around. Explain what's happening here. No obligations, no contracts, just information. You strike me as someone who prefers to understand a situation before acting." She was good. Metro Man could hear the calculation in every word, see the strategy in every gesture. This wasn't panic. This was procurement. She'd already started building the narrative, shaping the story of his arrival into something that fit whatever framework Vought operated in. He could leave. Could be gone before she finished her next sentence. But leaving meant staying ignorant, and ignorance meant being reactive instead of making choices. "One conversation," he said. Barrett's expression locked into something that might have been relief or victory, or both. "Excellent. We have a helicopter waiting." Behind her, someone was already making calls, already alerting the next tier of management that the asset was cooperative. Metro Man could hear every word through their encrypted channels, could read the subtext in their body language, could see the whole mechanism of Vought starting to turn. They had contracts for disasters that hadn't happened yet. Templates for incidents still in the planning stages. This wasn't crisis response. This was an assembly line. He'd been in a cage before. Knew what the bars looked like, even when they were disguised as opportunity. But he'd also learned that the best way to understand a trap was to walk into it deliberately. The helicopter was exactly as corporate as expected. Leather seats, mood lighting, a small team of assistants who didn't make eye contact, but took notes on everything. Barrett sat across from him, professional distance maintained, one hand on her phone, the other gesturing to her assistant for talking points on printed cards. "I'm curious," she said, as they lifted off, reading from one of the cards. "Do you have a name you'd like us to use?" Metro Man looked out the window at the city growing closer. At the lights, at the towers, at what looked like home, but wasn't. Metro Man, he said, because the name was already dead in the world he'd left. Using it here was like putting on old clothes that didn't fit quite right anymore. Metro Man. Barrett typed something on her phone. Her assistant made a note. "That has a nice ring to it. Very marketable." "I'm not a product." "Of course not. But you are a story whether you want to be or not. Better to be part of shaping that story than letting someone else write it for you. The helicopter descended toward a tower that dominated the skyline. Vaught's name in letters large enough to be seen from New Jersey. This wasn't just a headquarters. This was a monument to control. They landed on a private helipad. More assistants waiting, more cameras. Metro Man could see the whole apparatus of something much larger than just a company. This was infrastructure. This was systems within systems, all designed to contain, manage, and monetize the extraordinary. Barrett led him into an elevator. It descended smoothly, quietly. Muzak played at a volume calibrated to not be annoying, but just present enough to fill silence. "We'll get you set up in one of our consultation suites," Barrett said, still reading from her cards. "Get you some food, some rest. In the morning we can discuss your situation more thoroughly. I've already arranged for our legal team to draft some preliminary documents, nothing binding, just frameworks for how we might work together." Frameworks, options, like I said. The elevator opened onto a floor that looked like a 5-star hotel had merged with a corporate office and a film studio. Everything designed to impress, to overwhelm, to make the extraordinary feel like it was just part of how Vought did business. A man was waiting in the lobby, tall, blonde, wearing a suit that looked like it had been painted onto a body that had never known doubt. His smile was perfect. His posture was perfect. Everything about him was perfect in a way that made Metro Man's instincts fire warning shots. "Metro Man," the man said, extending a hand. "Welcome to Vought. I'm Homelander, leader of the Seven. I hear you made quite an entrance." Metro Man shook the offered hand, felt the pressure, the testing. The way Homelander squeezed just slightly harder than necessary, just enough to establish dominance without being obvious about it. "Not intentional," Metro Man said. Homelander's smile didn't change. "The best entrances never are. Ashley, I hope you don't mind, but I thought I'd personally welcome our new arrival. Show him around. Help him understand how things work here." "Of course," Barrett said, though Metro Man could hear the subtext in her voice. This wasn't planned. Homelander had inserted himself into the process. "Great." Homelander put a hand on Metro Man's shoulder. "Friendly, proprietary. Let me give you the tour." They walked through corridors lined with promotional materials. Posters, billboards, images of people in costumes doing heroic things for cameras that were always perfectly positioned. The Seven Stillwell had called them. Vaught's premier team of enhanced individuals, their flagship product. "So," Homelander said, steering them toward a conference room, "where are you from originally?" "Somewhere else." "Vague. I like it. Mystery is good for the brand. People eat that up. The whole stranger from another place thing. Very Superman, very classic. Ashley's probably already thinking about how to pitch it." Metro Man looked at him. At the perfect hair, the perfect teeth. The costume that had been designed by a committee to hit every demographic sweet spot. This wasn't a hero. This was a product that had learned to walk and talk. "I'm not interested in being pitched," Metro Man said. Homelander laughed. Perfect. Practiced. The kind of laugh that came from thousands of hours of media training. Everyone says that. Then they see the numbers, the reach, the impact. Vought doesn't just manage heroes. We create cultural moments. We make people matter in ways they never could on their own. They entered the conference room. A long table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and on the table a contract, thick, professional, already prepared. "Perpetual image rights," Homelander said, gesturing at the document. "Standard for anyone working with Vought. It's just a formalization of partnership. You do what you do best. We handle everything else. PR, legal merchandising, global outreach. You get to be the hero. We make sure the world sees it. Metro Man picked up the contract, flipped through it, saw the language about exclusive representation, about media control, about Vaught's ownership of his image, his story, his identity. "I've been in a cage before," he said quietly. Homelander's smile froze for just a fraction of a second. "This isn't a cage. This is opportunity." "No." Metro Man set the contract down. "This is a cage with better lighting." The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally. Emotionally. Homelander's smile stayed in place, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something cold and controlled and absolutely certain of its own authority. "Let me explain something to you." Homelander said, his voice still friendly, but underlaid with something sharp. "You're in a new world. You don't know the rules. You don't know the players. You don't know what happens to people who try to operate outside the framework. Vought doesn't just manage heroes. We protect them. From themselves. From bad publicity. From the consequences of thinking they can do this alone." Metro Man met his gaze, held it, saw the threat being delivered with a smile. "I appreciate the warning," Metro Man said, "but I'm not signing." Homelander's hand moved to the contract. Not threatening, just present. "Think about it. Sleep on it. In the morning we can talk about what happens next, about what your options actually are." Metro Man stood. "I know what my options are. I've always known." He walked toward the window, looked out at Manhattan, at the city that wasn't his, but looked close enough to trigger old instincts, old patterns, old mistakes he'd already made once. "You can't just leave," Homelander said behind him. "Where would you go? What would you do? Everything in this world is documented, tracked, managed. Without Vought, you're just a problem waiting to happen. Maybe, not maybe. Definitely. This isn't Metro City or wherever the hell you came from. This is reality. And in reality, people like us either work within the system or the system works against us." Metro Man turned back, looked at Homelander, at the perfect product of whatever system had created him, at the warning disguised as advice. "I've heard this speech before," Metro Man said. "Different city, different people, same essential threat. Be the symbol we need you to be, or become the problem we need to solve. Then you know how this works." "I know how it ends." Homelander's smile finally dropped. "We'll talk in the morning, after you've had time to understand what you're actually dealing with." Metro Man walked toward the door, stopped, looked back. "I already understand," he said. "That's the problem." He left Homelander standing in the conference room, left the contract unsigned on the table, left the cage that hadn't even bothered to hide its bars. But he didn't leave the building. Not yet. Because leaving meant not understanding the full scope of what he'd fallen into. And he needed to understand everything before he decided how to break it. Behind him, he could hear Homelander's voice. Quiet, controlled. Speaking to someone on the phone. "Make sure security knows. He doesn't leave the building without my authorization. And get me everything we have on dimensional breaches. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Metro Man kept walking. Let Homelander think walls and authorization meant something. Let him think this was his city, his territory, his kingdom to manage. The cameras tracked him through the hallways. Dozens of them. Hundreds probably throughout the building. All recording. All feeding into systems designed to monitor, analyze, and control. He stopped in front of one. Looked directly into the lens. Somewhere someone was watching. Someone was building a file. Someone was deciding what narrative to construct around the man who'd appeared from nowhere and refused to sign. Metro Man didn't smile, didn't threaten, just looked. The city lights stretched out beyond the tower's windows, familiar and foreign at once. He'd been here before, just never in a place that was quite this efficient at pretending the cage was freedom. They'd try harder tomorrow, they always did. The consultation suite had a bed that nobody expected him to use a bathroom, stocked with products in miniature bottles and a window that didn't open. Metro Man stood by the glass and watched the city move through its night cycle. Emergency vehicles painted red stripes across distant streets. Helicopters traced patrol patterns. The infrastructure of control visible if you knew how to look. His phone buzzed. Except he didn't have a phone. The device sat on the bedside table, new in its packaging, already loaded with contacts. Vaught's number. Ashley Barrett's direct line. Something labeled 7 group chat. A text message waiting. Breakfast meeting 8 a.m. Car will collect you at 7:45. Business casual preferred. AB. Metro Man picked up the phone. Felt the weight of it. This wasn't hospitality. This was a leash disguised as convenience. He set it back down without responding. The sun rose over a city that looked like home through a filter of wrong angles and unfamiliar rhythms. Metro Man showered because the alternative was letting Vaught decide when he cleaned himself. He ignored the business casual suggestion and kept the suit he'd arrived in. Blue and red, cape and all, if they wanted him performing, he'd perform in his own costume. The car arrived at 7:45 exactly. The driver didn't make small talk, didn't ask questions, just drove with the practiced silence of someone who'd learned that corporate passengers preferred the illusion of privacy. They pulled into Vaught Tower's underground garage. Different entrance than last night. This one marked talent access in letters that managed to sound both exclusive and demeaning. The elevator rose with muzak that might have been the same recording from last night, looped infinite. The breakfast meeting occupied a conference room with a view of Central Park and a table loaded with food nobody would eat. The 7 were already there, all of them, arranged like products on a shelf, each in their designated seat, each projecting their brand-assigned personality. Homelanders sat at the head. Perfect posture, perfect smile. Flanked by Queen Maeve looking tired in a way makeup couldn't quite hide, and A-Train vibrating slightly either from nerves or whatever pharmaceutical enhancement Vaught provided to keep their fastest man fast. The Deep sat further down, trying to look important. Black Noir occupied a corner like a shadow that had learned to sit in chairs. Starlight was there too, blonde and bright, and wearing an expression that didn't quite match her costume's optimism. Metro Man. Homelander stood hand extended, playing gracious host for an audience of cameras Metro Man could now see mounted in the corners. Welcome to your first official 7 meeting. Well, preliminary meeting. We don't usually expand the roster, but for someone with your evident capabilities, exceptions can be made. Metro Man shook the offered hand. Felt the same testing pressure. Returned it exactly, neither yielding nor escalating. I haven't agreed to join anything. Of course not. This is exploratory. Ashley just thought it would be valuable for you to meet the team. Understand how we operate. See if it's a fit. Homelander gestured to an empty chair. Please, sit, eat. We're all friends here. Metro Man remained standing, looked at each of them in turn. Maeve met his eyes briefly, then looked away with something that might have been sympathy or warning. A-Train's vibration increased slightly. Starlight held his gaze longer than the others, and there was something there. Recognition, maybe, of what he wasn't sure yet. The cameras are for promotional content. Homelander continued smooth as marketing copy. Everything we do gets documented. Meetings, training sessions, community events, transparency with the public. They love seeing how the team operates behind the scenes. Edited transparency, Metro Man said. Homelander's smile acquired an edge. Curated. We show them what matters, what inspires. Nobody wants to see the boring parts, or the true parts. Truth is subjective. What matters is the story people remember. Homelander sat back down, gestured again at the empty chair. But please, you're our guest. Help yourself. Ashley will be along shortly with the day's schedule. Metro Man moved to the window instead. Looked down at the city. At the people beginning their morning routines, unaware that several floors above them, Vought was staging hospitality as a form of containment. Not hungry? The Deep asked too loud, trying to fill space. No. Ashley Barrett entered with 2 assistants and a tablet. She looked like she'd already been awake for hours, managing crises that hadn't made it to anyone else's awareness yet. Good morning, everyone. Metro Man, thank you for joining us. I hope your accommodations were comfortable. They were accommodating, Metro Man said. Barrett's professional smile didn't waver. Excellent. So today's schedule. We have a photo session at 9. Just basic promotional shots. Hero poses, group dynamics, nothing elaborate. Then at 11 we have a community outreach event in Brooklyn. School visit, very low-key. After that, lunch with some of our corporate partners, followed by a training demonstration at 3. The goal is to give you a sense of what a typical day looks like for our team members. That's not a typical day, Maeve said quietly. That's a performance day. Barrett's smile tightened microscopically. Every day is an opportunity to connect with the public and reinforce Vought's mission of heroic excellence. What she means, Homelander said, is that we take our public image seriously. It's not enough to be powerful. We have to be inspirational, aspirational. We have to give people something to believe in. Metro Man turned from the window. I've heard this pitch before. Then you understand its importance. I understand its purpose. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Homelander's smile remained fixed, but something behind his eyes recalibrated. Well, why don't we start with the photo session, get some basic material, see how you photograph. The camera loves some people more than others. They moved to a soundstage that occupied an entire floor. Lights, green screens, equipment that could simulate any environment without anyone having to leave the building. A photographer waited with assistants who arranged the 7 into practiced formations, each member hitting their mark without being told. Metro Man, if you could stand here. The photographer pointed to a spot slightly behind Homelander. We'll start with some group shots. Establish the visual language of the expanded roster. Metro Man remained where he was. I haven't joined your roster. Of course. These are preliminary, for consideration. If you could just... No. Homelander stepped closer, voice low enough the crew couldn't hear, but Metro Man's enhanced senses caught every word. You're making this difficult. We're trying to help you. Trying to integrate you into something bigger than yourself. The least you could do is cooperate with some photographs. I don't need help. I need information. Information comes with trust. Trust comes with cooperation. Metro Man looked at him. At the perfect hair and perfect teeth and perfect costume that probably had a team of people maintaining it between appearances. I've seen what your cooperation costs. Before Homelander could respond, alarms cut through the building. Not the gentle chimes of scheduled alerts. Sharp, urgent signals that made the 7 react with practiced efficiency. Comms activated. People moved with purpose. The photographer and crew retreated to the walls. Ashley Barrett's voice came through the PA system. Active incident in progress. Lower Manhattan. Structural collapse, multiple casualties. 7, you're greenlit for immediate response. The team moved as one toward the exit. Homelander paused, looked back at Metro Man. You want to see what we do? Come watch. See how professionals handle a crisis. Metro Man followed. Not because Homelander invited him, because actual people in actual danger mattered more than Vought's corporate choreography. They flew, most of them. A-Train ran. Metro Man kept pace effortlessly, arriving at the scene simultaneously with the others. A construction site. 20 stories of steel and concrete, the top third leaning at an angle that physics wouldn't tolerate much longer. Workers trapped on scaffolding, civilians in the street below, too close filming on phones instead of running. The 7 deployed with practiced coordination. Homelander barked orders. Maeve moved toward the base, bracing structural supports. A train evacuated civilians at speeds that blurred him into afterimages. The deep looked for water mains to shut down. Starlight provided illumination in the darker sections. It was efficient, practiced. Each member playing their role in a choreography they'd performed dozens of times. But Metro Man could see the cameras, not news cameras. Vought drones positioned at optimal angles before the 7 had even arrived. This wasn't a response. This was a production. He moved faster than any of them could track. Not because he was showing off. Because people were about to die, while the 7 positioned themselves for good shots. The scaffolding gave way. 6 workers falling. A train was on the wrong side of the building. Homelander was directing Maeve. Nobody was in position. Metro Man was. He caught all 6. Moved between them in microseconds, redirecting trajectories, absorbing impacts, setting them down on stable ground before the human eye could process movement. To everyone watching, it looked like the workers simply stopped falling. Appeared on the ground. Safe. The 7 froze. Homelander's expression cycled through confusion to anger, to something colder in the span of a heartbeat. Metro Man didn't wait for the debrief. Didn't wait for Homelander's reaction. He just made sure the structure was stable, checked for additional casualties, and departed before Vought's drones could establish their narrative. He could hear them trying to adjust on the fly. Ashley Barrett's voice in multiple earpieces, rapid instructions about how to frame what just happened. How to maintain control of a story that had moved faster than their cameras. Metro Man didn't go back to Vought Tower. He went to a rooftop 3 blocks away and watched the cleanup. Watched the 7 pose for photographs with first responders. Watched Homelander give an impromptu press conference, all smiles and reassurance, taking credit for a save he hadn't made while never quite saying he'd made it. His phone buzzed. 23 missed calls from Ashley Barrett. 17 texts. The most recent one read, "We need to talk about protocol. Return to tower immediately." Metro Man turned the phone off. Below him, in an alley that the Vought drones hadn't covered, someone was watching. A woman. Young. Wearing a hoodie that didn't quite hide her blonde hair. She looked up directly at him and nodded once. Starlight. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of evacuated workers and emergency personnel. Metro Man watched her go. Saw her stop at the corner, pull out her phone, type something. Put it away, keep walking. His phone vibrated. He even turned off something was coming through. A text from an unknown number. Garage B, Level 3, Section J, 11 p.m. Come alone. Delete this. Metro Man looked back toward Vought Tower. At the fortress of cameras and contracts and carefully managed truth. At the machine that had already started processing the morning's incident into whatever narrative served their purposes. He'd seen enough. The 7 weren't heroes. They were performers in a show where real danger was just another opportunity for good publicity. Where saving lives mattered less than being seen saving lives. And somewhere in that machine, at least one person had noticed that he'd noticed. The sun moved across Manhattan's sky. Vought's drones packed up. The 7 returned to their tower. The news cycle absorbed the incident and moved on, already forgetting the details, in favor of the approved story. Metro Man stayed on his rooftop and waited for night to fall. When it did, he went to Garage B. Garage B was the kind of parking structure that existed in every major city. Concrete and oil stains and fluorescent lights that hummed at frequencies meant to discourage loitering. Level 3 Section J was emptier than the rest. Deliberate. Someone had made sure the security cameras in this section were aimed at nothing useful. Metro Man arrived 10 minutes early and waited in a shadow that the overhead lighting couldn't quite reach. He could hear the building's systems, the elevator machinery, the ventilation, the heartbeats of 3 people approaching from the stairwell, trying to move quietly and failing, because quiet was relative when your hearing could track a conversation 6 floors away. They emerged into Section J at exactly 11. 3 of them. The blonde woman from earlier, still in her hoodie, but moving differently now. Less performance, more purpose. A younger man, nervous energy radiating off him like heat shimmer. And a third figure, older, moving with the kind of deliberate casualness that came from decades of not getting caught. Metro Man stepped out of the shadow. The older man didn't flinch, just stopped, hands visible, and smiled without warmth. Well, you actually showed. Wasn't sure you would. You went to effort. Seemed rude not to acknowledge it. Effort. The man laughed short and sharp. That's polite. I'm Billy Butcher. This is Huey Campbell, and you've already met Starlight, though, probably not formally. Starlight pulled back her hood. Her expression was different than it had been at the photo shoot. Harder. Annie January. That's my real name. Starlight is what Vought calls me. Metro Man is what Vought started calling me, Metro Man said. It was mine first. Funny how that works, Butcher said. They take everything. Names, lives, dignity. Then they package it and sell it back to you like they did you a favor. He moved closer, not threatening, just closing distance. You're probably wondering why we dragged you down here. Why Starlight risked her pretty little career to slip you that number. You want something, Metro Man said. Everyone here wants something. Smart and observant. I like that. Butcher's smile acquired edges. Here's what I want. I want you to kill Homelander. The garage was silent, except for the ventilation hum and Huey's sharp inhale. Billy, Huey started. Shut it. Man needs to hear the ask straight. Butcher kept his eyes on Metro Man. You saw him today. Saw how he operates. All that power, and he uses it for photo ops and press conferences. But that's not the worst of it. That's just the show. The real Homelander. He's a monster. Kills when it suits him. Threatens when he's bored. Terrorizes because he can, and nobody's strong enough to stop him. Metro Man looked at each of them. Starlight's expression confirmed Butcher's words. Huey looked like he was carrying weight that didn't fit on his frame. Butcher just waited patient as a trap. And you think I'm strong enough, Metro Man said. I think you're the first thing that's walked into this city that Homelander can't just laser through when he gets tired of playing nice. I think you saved 6 workers this morning before his precious cameras could even focus. I think you're exactly what we've been waiting for. A weapon, a solution. No. Metro Man's voice was flat, final. I'm not interested. Butcher's expression didn't change. You haven't heard the whole pitch yet. Don't need to. You want me to kill someone? I don't kill. Even monsters, especially monsters. Killing them just makes martyrs. Makes them bigger in death than they were in life. You kill Homelander, Vought turns him into a saint. Builds statues, names buildings, creates a legend that justifies whatever they do next. So you just let him keep terrorizing people? Huey spoke up, voice tight. Let him keep killing when he feels like it. Metro Man looked at him. Saw genuine pain there. Fresh wounds that hadn't scarred over yet. No. I stop him differently. How? Starlight asked. We've tried exposing him. The public doesn't care. We've tried legal routes. Vought buries everything. We've tried. She stopped, swallowed whatever she'd been about to say. Nothing sticks. Nothing matters. He's untouchable. Not untouchable, Metro Man said. Protected. There's a difference. Butcher pulled out a phone. Not a Vought-issued device. Something older, more secure. He pulled up files. This is what we have on him. Years of work, evidence, testimonies, bodies. All of it documented. All of it useless because Vought controls the narrative and nobody's strong enough to force the truth out where it can't be ignored. He held up the phone. Metro Man could see the files without taking it. could read the contents at speeds that made scrolling irrelevant. It was damning. All of it. Murder, assault, collateral damage that got called acceptable losses. Children caught in crossfire that Vought's PR team had erased from the official story. This isn't just Homelander, Metro Man said. This is Vought. This is the system that created him and protects him. So you see the problem. I see the scope. You're not asking me to kill a man. You're asking me to fight an infrastructure. I'm asking you to do what nobody else can, Butcher said. Whatever that looks like, however you want to play it. You want to take down the system, fine. Do it. But Homelander has to fall. He has to be stopped. Metro Man handed the phone back without taking it. I'm not your weapon. I don't take orders. Don't execute plans I didn't make. Don't kill on someone else's schedule. Then what do? I break cages. Butcher stared at him for a long moment. Then laughed. Actually laughed genuine and bitter at once. Break cages? That's poetic. Probably makes you feel better about not doing the hard thing. But breaking cages doesn't stop him. Doesn't save the next person he decides to kill because they looked at him wrong. Billy. Starlight's voice carried warning. He's not wrong about the martyr thing. You kill Homelander, Vought makes him a hero. Uses his death to justify everything. So what's your brilliant alternative? Butcher turned on her. Keep documenting. Keep collecting evidence nobody will ever see. Keep pretending that one day somehow truth will matter. I didn't say I wouldn't help, Metro Man interrupted. I said I won't kill him. The garage went quiet again. Butcher turned back, suspicion replacing anger. Help how? You said nobody's strong enough to force the truth out where it can't be ignored. You're wrong. I'm strong enough. Not to kill Homelander, to make him irrelevant. Irrelevant? Butcher repeated, tasting the word. What the hell does that mean? It means Vought's power isn't in Homelander's strength. It's in their control of how people see him, how they frame him, how they shape the story. Metro Man gestured at Starlight. She knows. She's been living inside that story. Starlight nodded slowly. Everything's narrative. Everything's spin. The actual events matter less than how they're presented. So you take the narrative, Metro Man said. You make them show the truth. Not to a court, not to regulators who can be bought, to everyone, all at once. In a way Vought can't spin or bury or explain away. And how exactly do we do that? Huey asked. You get me the evidence, everything you have, everything you can get. I'll make sure the world sees it. Butcher's eyes narrowed. That's it. You'll what hold up signs, make a speech. I'll do what I do best, Metro Man said. I'll refuse to play by their rules in a way they can't ignore. That's vague. That's intentional. The less you know about how, the less you can be blamed for when it happens. Butcher looked at Starlight. She looked at Huey. Something unspoken passed between them. Years of trust or desperation, or both. All right, Butcher said finally. We'll get you the evidence, but I want to be clear about something. If this doesn't work, if your refuse to play by rules bullshit doesn't accomplish anything, I'm going back to my plan. The one that ends with Homelander dead. Fair, Metro Man said. But you should know something too. If you try to kill him, I'll stop you. Why you're not his friend? No, but revenge isn't justice. And you killing him makes you what he is. Just wearing different clothes. Butcher's jaw tightened. For a moment, violence hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Then he stepped back. We'll see. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's another way. But if there isn't, we'll find out exactly what you're willing to do to stop me. Hopefully it won't come to that, Huey said quickly. We're all on the same side here. We all want Homelander gone. And Vought exposed. And He trailed off, overwhelmed by the scope of what they were actually trying to do. Starlight put a hand on his shoulder, looked back at Metro Man. When do you need the evidence? How long to compile everything you have? We've already compiled it. Years of it. But getting it to you without Vought noticing is the problem. They monitor everything I do, everyone I talk to. Then don't give it to me directly. Metro Man looked at Huey. You're not on their radar as much, less monitored. How do you know that? Huey asked. Because you're still alive and standing here. If Vought knew you were working against them, you wouldn't be. It wasn't comforting, but it was true. Huey nodded slowly. Okay. How do we get it to you? Metro Man thought for a moment. Dead drop. Somewhere public. Somewhere with too many witnesses for Vought to clean quietly. Grand Central, tomorrow, noon. Leave it in locker 217. I'll collect it. That's a movie cliché, Butcher said. Clichés work because they're simple. Simple is hard to intercept. And if they intercept anyway, then I'll know they're watching, which tells me something useful. Butcher studied him for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who wanted to fight, to punch, to win. I've already won fights, Metro Man said. It didn't solve anything, just moved the problem somewhere else. So what does solve it? Making them fight themselves, making the system expose itself. That's optimistic. That's strategic. Starlight's phone buzzed. She checked it, tension spiking. I need to go. Vaught's doing a late-night check-in. They're calling everyone in the 7 back to the tower. Some kind of emergency meeting. About what? Huey asked. Probably about him. She nodded at Metro Man. About what happened today. About how to control the narrative now that someone's moved faster than their cameras. Go, Metro Man said. Don't give them a reason to suspect. Starlight hesitated. If this works, if we actually pull this off, what happens to me, to all the people inside Vought who might be collateral damage? Then you get to decide who you are when nobody's writing your script. She looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded and left, pulling her hood up, disappearing back into the role Vought had built for her. Huey went next, nervous energy finally finding an outlet in movement. Grand Central, tomorrow, noon. Locker 217. I'll be there. Don't be there, Metro Man said. Drop it and leave. Don't give them a face to connect to the action. Huey nodded and departed, leaving just Metro Man and Butcher in the empty section of the garage. You really think this will work? Butcher asked. I think it's worth trying before we resort to murder. And if it doesn't work, then you'll do what you were always going to do. And I'll decide then whether to stop you. Butcher laughed again. That same bitter sound. You're honest? I'll give you that. Most soups lie. To themselves, most of all. But you actually seem to know what you are. I'm someone who's tired of being told what I should be. Yeah. Butcher looked at the concrete ceiling, the fluorescent lights, the whole structure of the cage they were standing in. Yeah, I know that feeling. He left without another word. Walked away with a kind of deliberate casualness that suggested he'd never been there at all. Metro Man waited in the empty garage for 10 more minutes. Made sure no one was watching. No cameras had suddenly powered on. No Vought teams were converging. Then he left through a different exit and flew not to Vought Tower, but to a rooftop on the other side of the city, where he could watch the building's lights and think about what he'd just agreed to. Not killing, not following orders, not being anyone's weapon, just refusing to play by rules that turn people into products. It was what he'd always done. Just never in a place quite this determined to make the product the only option. Tomorrow at noon, Huey would leave evidence in a locker. Tomorrow night, Metro Man would decide what to do with truth in a world that preferred comfortable lies. But tonight he just watched the city and wondered if breaking cages would be enough this time, or if Butcher was right and some problems only had one solution. The morning started with 27 texts from Ashley Barrett, each one more urgent than the last. Metro Man read them while standing on a rooftop in Queens, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades that almost looked clean from this distance. Urgent, need your location immediately. Metro Man, please respond. We have a situation. Homelander is asking questions. Where are you? This is not optional. Return to tower now. He turned the phone off and flew to Grand Central Terminal. The station at 11:45 was exactly as crowded as he'd expected. Commuters flowing in patterns, worn smooth by repetition. Tourists consulting maps and phones. Transit police watching for problems that fit their definitions. Nobody looked up. Nobody saw the man in blue and red land on a maintenance access 2 blocks away and walk in through the employee entrance. Locker 217 was in a bank of storage units near the subway connection. Metro Man waited across the corridor, positioned where he could see but wouldn't be obviously watching. 11:58, 11:59. At exactly noon, Huey appeared. Looking nervous in a way that would have been suspicious if anyone had been looking for suspicious. He carried a gym bag that clearly didn't contain gym equipment. Walked directly to locker 217, opened it with a key, placed the bag inside, closed the door, walked away without looking back. Good. He'd listened about not lingering. Metro Man gave it 5 minutes. Watched the flow of people. Tracked the security cameras and their blind spots. Scanned for anyone showing too much interest in locker 217 or Huey's departure. Nothing. Either Vought wasn't watching, or they were watching so carefully that even Metro Man's senses couldn't spot the surveillance. He collected the bag at 12:07. Didn't open it there, just walked out the way he'd entered and flew to a rooftop in the Bronx that offered good sightlines and no nearby buildings. The bag contained 3 external drives, a tablet and a handwritten note on paper that looked like it had been torn from a reporter's notebook. Everything we have. Years of evidence, testimony, video, documents. Most of it we can't prove came from us, if you get caught with it. Some of it will get people killed if Vought traces the sources. Be careful, and make it count. B. Metro Man connected the first drive to the tablet, started reviewing files. It was exactly as damning as Butcher had promised. Video of Homelander using excessive force. Audio of him threatening civilians. Documents showing Vought had buried investigations. Testimony from survivors who'd been paid to stay silent. Financial records proving systematic cover-ups, and more. Compound fee distribution to criminals. Manufactured crises used as marketing opportunities. Soups created deliberately unstable to maximize drama and viewership. The entire infrastructure of Vaught's business model laid bare in spreadsheets and contracts and casual emails that treated human suffering like quarterly projections. Metro Man was halfway through the second drive when his phone powered itself on. He hadn't turned it on. It just activated. Screen lighting up. Single notification. Car waiting for you at intersection below. Homelander, request your presence, non-negotiable. Metro Man looked down. Sure enough, a black SUV sat at the corner, idling, windows tinted, waiting with the patience of something that knew its target couldn't actually leave. He gathered the drives and tablet into the bag, zipped it, left it on the rooftop under a ventilation unit where nobody would look unless they already knew to look there. Then he descended to street level. The SUV's door opened as he approached. Empty inside except for the driver, who didn't make eye contact. Metro Man got in. The door closed with a solid thunk of expensive engineering. They drove to a location that wasn't Vought Tower, a studio space in Midtown. The kind of facility that could be dressed up to look like anywhere used for commercial shoots and interviews and content that needed to feel authentic while being completely controlled. Homelander waited inside. Alone. No cameras, no assistants, no witnesses. Just him standing in the center of an empty soundstage, still in costume, still wearing that smile. But it looked different now, strained, like a mask that no longer fit quite right. Metro Man. The smile widened, became something that might have fooled cameras, but didn't fool anyone standing in the same room. Thanks for joining me. I thought we should have a conversation, just us. No executives, no PR teams, no performance. All right, Metro Man said. You've been avoiding my calls, Ashley's calls. The whole team's been trying to reach you. Homelander circled slowly, hands clasped behind his back. Casual, controlled. That's not how we do things here. We're a team. Teams communicate. Teams coordinate. Teams don't just disappear for 12 hours. I don't remember agreeing to be part of your team. No, you didn't. But you are part of this city now, part of this world. And in this world, there are rules, structures, ways things work. Homelander stopped circling, faced him directly. Yesterday, you moved faster than our cameras, saved people before we could position properly, made us look slow. People were falling. People fall every day. What matters is who's seen saving them. The smile cracked slightly. You don't understand what we've built here. Vought isn't just a company. It's the system that keeps this city running. That keeps Soups from being hunted. That turns power into something the public can accept instead of fear. You disrupt that you hurt everyone. By saving people too quickly, Homelander's eye twitched, microscopically. By not following protocol. By making us adjust our response midstream. By forcing Ashley to scramble and reframe and explain why footage doesn't match witness accounts. Maybe your footage shouldn't be the priority. The soundstage went very quiet. Even the air circulation seemed to pause. Excuse me. Homelander's voice dropped. Lost the performance polish. Became something flat and cold and absolutely certain of its authority. Your cameras mattered more than those workers. You were positioning for shots while they were dying. That's not heroism. That's theater. Homelander moved faster than most humans could track. Not faster than Metro Man. Close, though. Suddenly, in Metro Man's personal space, eyes starting to glow with that distinctive red that preceded violence. You think you understand what we do? What I do, I've been saving this city for years. Years of putting myself on the line. Years of being what people need me to be. And you show up for one day and think you know better. I know actual people were in actual danger. That's all I needed to know. That's naive. That's the thinking of someone who doesn't understand consequences. Homelander's eyes brightened, heat radiating, not quite firing, just promising. Let me explain consequences. I could laser you right now, cut you in half, no cameras, no witnesses, just another soupe who couldn't handle the pressure and snapped, attacked me, forced me to defend myself. Metro Man didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked at him. Go ahead. What? If you think you can cut me in half, go ahead. See what happens. Homelander's lasers flickered, uncertainty breaking through the rage. You're bluffing. I'm really not. You want to know if you're stronger? Find out. Right here. Right now. No cameras to worry about, no narrative to manage. Just us. The lasers died. Homelander stepped back, smiled again. But it was different now. Defensive. I don't need to prove anything. I'm Homelander. Everyone already knows what I can do. Then why threaten me? Because you need to understand how things work. You need to understand that there are consequences for not playing along. Homelander adjusted his costume, smoothed his hair. Vought protects people like us. But that protection has conditions. You work with us, you get the full support of the organization. You work against us. He let it hang. You make me a problem. We make you a tragedy. A cautionary tale, a soup who couldn't integrate, who became a threat, who had to be contained for public safety. Homelander's smile returned to its practiced perfection. It's not personal. It's just business. The same business that's kept me safe and famous and loved for years. The same business that could do that for you if you just stop fighting it. Metro Man looked around the empty studio, at the green screens and lighting rigs and camera positions. All the infrastructure for manufacturing truth. I've heard this speech before, he said quietly. Different city, different people threatening different consequences. It always ends the same way. How's that? With me leaving? Homelander laughed. Sharp, genuine. Leaving where this is the whole world. There's nowhere Vought doesn't reach. Nowhere you can go that we won't find you. And if you become enough of a problem, we don't just find you. We make you the story. We make you the villain. We turn public opinion into a weapon you can't fight. Public opinion built on lies. Public opinion built on whatever story serves them best. And right now, the story that serves them best is the one where I'm the hero and you're the outsider who doesn't understand how things work. Homelander moved toward the exit. Think about it. Really think about what you're choosing. Ashley's going to call you in an hour with a revised schedule. Training session, press conference, opportunities to show the world you're on the right side. I suggest you show up, because the alternative is we start showing them the wrong side. He left, door closing with a pneumatic hiss. Metro Man stood alone in the empty studio, surrounded by equipment designed to make manufactured reality look authentic. His phone buzzed. Ashley Barrett's name. He answered. Metro Man, thank God. Where are you? Homelander just called me, said you two had a productive conversation, but there were some concerns about... I'm done. Silence on the other end. Then carefully. Done with what exactly? Playing, performing, pretending this is anything other than what it is. I don't understand. What are you? Tell Homelander I'm not showing up for his press conference. Tell him I'm not following his schedule. Tell him I'm not interested in being managed. Metro Man, please, you need to understand the position this puts us in. If you go rogue, if you operate outside our framework, we can't protect you from... I don't want your protection. I want out of your cage. There is no out. There's only in or against. And if you're against us, we have resources. Legal teams, media relationships, political connections. We can make your life very difficult. You already have. Metro Man ended the call. Powered the phone completely off. Not just screen dark, actually dead. Then he returned to the Bronx rooftop where he'd hidden the evidence. The drives were still there. Still full of truth that Vought had spent years burying. Metro Man looked at the data. Then at the city. At Vought Tower, standing like a monument to control in the middle of Manhattan. He'd been patient. Had tried to understand. Had given them opportunities to be something other than what they were proving to be. But patience had limits. Understanding had boundaries. And he just watched Homelander threaten him with manufactured tragedy while standing in a studio designed to manufacture truth. Metro Man had been here before. Had reached this exact point in a different city, with different people making the same essential threat be ours or become our problem. Last time he'd faked his death and walked away. This time he decided he'd do something different. This time he'd make them show the world exactly what they were before he left. He gathered the drives, started planning. Not a speech, not a confrontation, something simpler. Something that people like Homelander and organizations like Vought couldn't spin or bury or explain away. He'd give them their press conference, their big event, their perfect stage. And then he'd tear the stage down in front of everyone watching. The sun moved across the Bronx sky. Metro Man stood on his rooftop and thought about what came next. About the machinery he was about to break and the narrative he was about to destroy. Somewhere in Midtown, Homelander was probably reporting back to Ashley about their productive conversation. About how Metro Man just needed time to understand consequences. He understood consequences fine. That's why he was going to make sure Vought experienced some. Vought scheduled the press conference for Thursday afternoon. prime time for news cycles, maximum visibility. They'd positioned it as a historic announcement about expanded partnerships and global initiatives. The kind of vague corporate language that meant nothing but generated headlines. Metro Man received the official invitation via courier at 6 a.m. Hand-delivered envelope. Embossed Vought logo. Inside a schedule printed on cardstock that probably cost more per sheet than most people's hourly wage. 2 p.m. arrival. Hair and makeup. Wardrobe consultation. 3 p.m. pre-brief with Ashley and the PR team. 4 p.m. stage time with the 7 for photo opportunities. 5 p.m. press conference in the main atrium. 6 p.m. private reception with select media and corporate partners. It was a production schedule, not an invitation. Metro Man set the cardstock on fire with a glance. Watched it curl and blacken. Then flew to the Bronx rooftop where he'd hidden the evidence drives. He spent the morning reviewing everything one more time. Made sure he understood the scope, the scale, the systematic nature of what Vought had built. This wasn't individual corruption. This was infrastructure, policy, business model. At 4:45, he flew to Vought Tower. The main atrium was already set up. Cameras positioned at optimal angles. Lighting designed to make everyone look heroic. Risers arranged so the 7 could stand in formation. A podium with Vought's logo projected behind it. Corporate sponsors' banners along the walls. Everything calibrated for maximum impact. The 7 were assembled in a holding area backstage. Homelander at the center, running through talking points with Ashley while an assistant touched up his hair. Queen Maeve looked exhausted. A-Train vibrated with whatever chemical enhancement kept him fast. The Deep practiced his smile in a mirror. Black Noir stood motionless. Starlight saw Metro Man arrive, and her expression flickered. Warning or recognition, or both. Metro Man. Ashley turned, professional smile locked in place. You made it. I was starting to worry. Let's get you mic'd up and... No, Metro Man said. I'm sorry. No microphone, no makeup, no coordination. He walked past her toward the stage entrance. I'll stand where I want. Say what I want. Or I leave. Homelander's head snapped up. We had an agreement. You show up, you participate properly, or what you already threatened me. Already explained consequences. I'm here. That's what you wanted. Ashley stepped between them. Damage control reflexes firing. Gentlemen, please. We have 50 media outlets about to go live. Whatever issues exist, we can discuss them after. There won't be an after, Metro Man said. Not the kind you're planning. He walked onto the stage before anyone could stop him. The atrium was full. Press corps in their designated section. Vought executives in premium seating. Carefully selected civilians positioned to look like authentic public interest. Cameras everywhere. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All recording. All feeding into Vought's broadcast infrastructure. Perfect. The 7 followed him out. Homelander's smile was back, laser-focused for the cameras. They took their positions. Homelander at the podium. The rest in formation. Metro Man stood slightly apart. Not integrated. Not part of the choreography. Ladies and gentlemen, Homelander began, voice carrying that practiced warmth that sounded genuine if you didn't know better. Thank you for joining us today. We have exciting news about Vought's expansion and our commitment to keeping America safe. But first, I'd like to introduce someone special. Someone who represents the future of heroism in this great nation. He gestured toward Metro Man. Cameras swiveled, focused, captured. Metro Man looked directly into the nearest camera, saw the red recording light, saw the infrastructure of narrative control preparing to process whatever happened next into whatever story served Vought's purposes. Then he moved, not fast by his standards, faster than anything they'd ever seen. To the cameras, it looked like he simply vanished. One frame present, next frame gone. The human eye couldn't process movement at that speed. The camera sensors struggled, produced blur and artifacts and gaps where solid matter had been microseconds before. But Metro Man's perception didn't compress time like that. For him, the world simply slowed, not stopped, just reduced to a pace where he could work. He targeted A-Train first. Not because A-Train was the biggest threat, but because speedsters could perceive things others couldn't. A-Train was already reacting, body starting to move chemicals in his bloodstream, firing, preparing to intercept or flee. Metro Man caught him mid-stride. Not violently, just firmly. Lifted him by the collar and carried him off the stage down the hallway into the nearest maintenance closet. Set him down, removed his shoes. All the compound vibe enhancement in the world didn't matter if you couldn't get traction. Then he took the small bottle of blue liquid from A-Train's pocket, the same substance that let him push beyond safe speeds. Metro Man poured it down a drain and left A-Train sitting on a bucket, shoeless and unable to dose, trying to process what had just happened. Time elapsed. From normal perspective, perhaps 3 seconds. Metro Man returned to the stage. Homelander was still mid-gesture, hand extended toward where Metro Man had been standing, expression beginning to shift from confidence toward confusion. The cameras were panning operators, trying to find their missing subject. Black Noir moved next. Silent. Professional. Reaching for weapons that Vought officially didn't let them carry on stage, but everyone knew existed anyway. Metro Man disarmed him. Not dramatically. Just reached into Noir's costume, removed the throwing knives and the garrote wire and the small pistol, and placed them neatly on a table backstage. Then he took Noir's comm unit, disconnected it, left him isolated from whatever instructions Ashley was probably screaming through the channel. The deep was easier. Metro Man simply relocated him, picked him up and flew him to the roof access door, locked it from the inside, and came back. The deep wasn't dangerous, just loud. Removing him from the equation meant one less variable. Queen Maeve didn't fight when Metro Man approached. She just looked at him with those tired eyes and nodded once. Permission or surrender or both. He moved her to a seat in the audience, first row, where she could watch but not participate, where cameras would catch her expression when everything fell apart. Starlight was already moving away from the formation, deliberately, giving him space, making it clear she wasn't part of what came next. Metro Man left her alone. That left Homelander. Time was catching up now. Homelander's confusion completing its transition to rage. Cameras still searching, audience beginning to murmur. Ashley's voice audible from backstage, high and sharp with panic, shouting instructions that nobody could follow because nobody knew what was happening. Metro Man stopped directly in front of Homelander, stood there while the world finished processing the previous 5 seconds and began catching up to the present. Homelander's lasers activated. Instant, reflexive, full power. Heat that could cut through steel, focused and precise, and absolutely certain of its effectiveness. The beams hit Metro Man's center mass. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there and let Homelander pour energy into an attack that accomplished nothing except proving a point. The beams died. Homelander stared, eyes wide, comprehension arriving in stages. First realization, the attack failed. Second realization, Metro Man wasn't even damaged. Third realization, everyone was watching. The cameras had found them again. Were recording, broadcasting, capturing Homelander's face in the moment he understood that his power meant nothing against something genuinely beyond him. Metro Man reached out. Slowly, deliberately, giving Homelander every opportunity to stop him. Homelander didn't move. Couldn't. frozen by shock or fear or the sudden understanding that strength he'd relied on his entire life was suddenly inadequate. Metro Man removed Homelander's comm unit. Then his cape, unclasped it carefully, let it fall to the stage. Homelander just stood there, the symbol of Vought's power, leader of the Seven, America's greatest hero, standing motionless while someone dismantled his costume piece by piece in front of every camera in the building. Metro Man didn't take everything. Just enough. The cape, the comm, the facade of invulnerability. Enough to show that Homelander wasn't untouchable, wasn't invincible, was just a man in a costume who'd believed his own marketing. Then Metro Man walked to the podium. The crowd was chaos now. Press shouting questions, executives standing, security converging, but not sure what to do because nothing in their training covered this scenario. Ashley, somewhere backstage, probably on 17 phone calls, simultaneously trying to salvage a situation that had already crossed the threshold into unsalvageable. Metro Man looked at the cameras, at the lights, at the infrastructure Vought had built to control how the world saw them. "Everything you've been told about Vought International is a lie," he said. Voice calm, clear, carrying without a microphone because he didn't need amplification. "The heroism is theater. The rescues are staged. The powers are products. And the protection they offer comes with a price that turns people into property." He pulled out a tablet. One of the drives Huey had left connected. Started playing footage on the screen behind him. Homelander using excessive force. Vought executives discussing manufactured crises. Internal memos about acceptable civilian casualties for maximum media impact. The cameras tried to cut away. Operators receiving instructions to stop broadcasting. But Metro Man had already interfaced with their systems, not through technology, just through being faster than the humans trying to control them. He'd physically adjusted the broadcast equipment, hardwired it to continue transmitting regardless of what the control room wanted. "This is what they bury," Metro Man continued. "This is what they spend millions to hide. Not because it's classified. Not because it's dangerous. Because it's true. And truth doesn't serve their business model." More footage played. Compound 5 being sold to criminals. Soups being created deliberately unstable to generate ongoing drama. Financial records showing Vought profiting from disasters they'd helped manufacture. Ashley appeared on stage, flanked by security. "Stop this! Stop this right now or what?" Metro Man looked at her. "You'll make me a problem. Make me a tragedy. You already threatened that. So did Homelander. So did everyone else who thought control and consequences were the same thing." He turned back to the cameras. "I'm not here to be your hero. I'm not here to replace their heroes. I'm here to show you that you don't need heroes who require billion-dollar corporations to tell you they're heroes. You need accountability, transparency, systems that work for you instead of profiting from your fear." Security moved in, 6 of them, armed with weapons designed for soup containment, tasers rated for enhanced targets, foam that supposedly could restrain anything. Metro Man didn't hurt them, just moved them, relocated them to the hallway, locked the door behind them, returned to the podium before anyone realized he'd left. "Vought International has spent decades building power by controlling narrative," he said. "By deciding what you see, what you hear, what you believe. I'm not asking you to believe me instead. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Make your own decisions. Stop letting corporations tell you who the heroes are." He ejected the tablet, tossed it into the press section. Let them scramble for it. Let them verify. Let them investigate. Homelander finally moved. Screamed. Actually screamed. Lost all composure and lunged. Not strategically. Not tactically. Just pure rage that someone had humiliated him in front of the world. Metro Man caught him, held him suspended 3 feet off the ground. Homelander thrashed, tried his lasers again, tried his strength, tried everything that had worked his entire life. Nothing worked. Metro Man set him down gently. "You're not a monster," he said quietly. "You're a product that was told it was a god. That's worse, because you believed it." He released Homelander and walked off the stage. Not through the doors, through the wall. Just pushed through the concrete like it was suggestion rather than barrier. Left a man-shaped hole that cameras would replay for weeks. Behind him, the atrium erupted. Press shouting, executives screaming. Ashley probably having a breakdown. Homelander standing motionless on stage, cape gone, calm gone, authority gone, surrounded by cameras that had caught every moment of his impotence. Metro Man flew to the Bronx rooftop where he'd started the day. Stood there and waited for the city to process what had just happened. For Vought's machinery to engage. For the response he knew was coming. His phone was gone. He'd left it behind deliberately. Didn't want their calls, their threats, their attempts to spin this into something manageable. What he'd just done wasn't manageable, wasn't containable, wasn't something that fit into their framework of problems with solutions. He'd broken their stage in front of everyone watching. Now came the consequences. The sun dropped toward the horizon. News helicopters circled Vought Tower. Emergency vehicles clustered outside. The machinery of crisis response spinning up. But this wasn't a crisis with a clear resolution. This was infrastructure damage. The kind that didn't fix quickly. Metro Man watched it all from his rooftop. Waited to see what Vought would do when everything they'd built to control narrative suddenly stopped being enough. He'd been patient, given them chances. Tried to work within systems even when those systems were broken. Patience was done now. The world had stopped moving for a few seconds this afternoon. When it started again, everything had changed. Everything except the one thing that mattered. Metro Man was still not their weapon, not their product, not their asset. Just someone who decided that some cages needed to be broken publicly. The city lights came on as darkness fell. Somewhere Vought was regrouping, planning, activating contingencies for scenarios they'd hoped would never happen. Let them plan. Metro Man had already accomplished what he came to do. The rest was just watching them prove him right. Vought's response came in stages. First denial. Official statements calling the press conference footage manipulated and under investigation. Then damage control. Ashley Barrett on every news channel explaining how a rogue-enhanced individual had compromised their security. Finally pivot. An emergency gala announced for Saturday night. A show of strength. A demonstration that Vought International remained unshaken. The invitation went to everyone who mattered. Corporate partners, political allies, media executives. 1,000 people in formal wear gathering to prove that Thursday's incident was an anomaly. That Vought's infrastructure remained solid, that confidence was warranted. They didn't invite Metro Man. He came anyway. The gala occupied Vought Tower's grand ballroom. Chandeliers that cost more than houses. Champagne that cost more than cars. A string quartet playing music that nobody listened to while everyone networked and performed normalcy. The 7 were positioned throughout the space like decorative pillars. Homelander at the center, wearing a new cape smile restored to factory settings. Pretending Thursday hadn't happened. Metro Man watched from a rooftop across the street. Could see everything through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Could hear the conversations, the laughter that sounded forced, the undercurrent of anxiety that expensive alcohol couldn't quite drown. His phone buzzed. The new one. The one Vought didn't know about. Huey's number. "They're moving the servers," Huey said without preamble. "Tonight, using the gala as cover." Ashley ordered a complete data purge. Everything we gave you, everything that proves what they are, it's all getting wiped. Where? Sub-level 5. Server farm. Backup systems. They're already down there. Portable drives. They're planning to physically destroy the evidence and blame it on you. Say you compromised their security to plant false information. Metro Man ended the call. Looked at the tower. At the gala on the 40th floor. At the server farm 5 stories underground. At the infrastructure Vought was trying to preserve by destroying evidence of its own corruption. He'd given them the data publicly on Thursday. But Vought had spent 3 days spinning it, calling it fabricated, demanding independent verification, using their media relationships to cast doubt, making truth into just another competing narrative. If they destroyed the servers, they could claim nothing was real. That Metro Man had manufactured everything, that the footage was altered, that the documents were forged. They'd win by making verification impossible. Metro Man flew across the gap between buildings, didn't enter through the gala level, went straight to sub-level 5. Through the wall, through concrete and rebar, and the presumption of security. The server farm was chaos. Technicians working frantically, pulling drives, smashing hardware. A woman in an expensive suit directing operations with the cold efficiency of someone managing asset destruction rather than preventing it. She saw Metro Man emerge through the wall and didn't even pause. "You're trespassing," she said. "This is private property, whatever you think you're doing." Metro Man didn't let her finish, just moved. Faster than security could react, faster than the techs could process. He collected every portable drive they'd prepared, every backup they'd loaded, every piece of evidence they were planning to destroy, gathered it all in milliseconds, and set it aside. Then he went to the main servers, the ones they couldn't easily move, the infrastructure that held years of Vaught's internal operations. Emails, memos, financial records, everything they'd never intended for public consumption. He didn't destroy it, just accessed it. Not through hacking, through being faster than any security protocol could stop. Opened the system, downloaded everything. Not to drives, to broadcast. The woman in the expensive suit realized what was happening and screamed, "Stop him! Cut the power! Shut down the—" Too late. Metro Man had already routed the data through Vaught's own broadcast infrastructure, the same network they used to transmit press conferences and promotional content, the same network currently feeding video of the gala upstairs to partner stations for B-roll footage. Every screen in the building switched, showed data instead of decorative content. Years of internal communications scrolling past. Memos about manufactured crises, emails discussing acceptable casualty rates, financial projections based on public fear. The gala noticed immediately. The decorative monitors that had been showing promotional footage suddenly displayed evidence. Conversation stopped. Champagne glasses lowered. Everyone looked up at screens showing Vaught's infrastructure laid bare. Homelander moved first, flew through the ceiling, didn't bother with doors, just smashed upward through multiple floors, leaving structural damage and screaming guests and the wreckage of pretending everything was fine. He arrived in sub-level 5 like a missile. Laser-focused rage aimed directly at Metro Man. No words, no posturing, just immediate violence from someone who'd spent 3 days reliving Thursday's humiliation and needed to reclaim dominance. His lasers fired. Full power. Sustained. Heat that distorted the air and made the nearby techs scramble for cover. Metro Man stood in the beam and felt nothing. Just thermal energy dispersing against invulnerability that Homelander still hadn't accepted as real. "Stop!" Homelander's voice cracked, raw, desperate. "Stop showing them that stop." Metro Man reached forward, slowly, deliberately, giving Homelander every opportunity to dodge, to retreat. to choose differently. Homelander lunged instead, threw a punch with all his strength. The kind of blow that had killed people. The kind of force that had convinced him for years that he was invincible. Metro Man caught the fist, held it. Didn't squeeze, didn't hurt him. Just stopped the attack with the same effortless certainty he'd shown on Thursday. "You can't win this," Metro Man said quietly, "because winning requires them not seeing what you are. I'm a hero, You're a product that believed its own advertising." Homelander screamed. Wordless, primal, tried to pull free, couldn't. Tried his lasers again at point-blank range, accomplished nothing. Tried his strength, his speed, every advantage he'd relied on his entire life. None of it mattered. Metro Man released him. Homelander staggered back, breathing hard, eyes wild. The perfect facade cracking into fragments. Above them, the gala had descended into chaos. Guests leaving, corporate partners distancing, media executives already calculating which side of the story would serve them better. The infrastructure of support that had kept Vought untouchable, beginning to fracture under the weight of evidence that couldn't be spun away. Security arrived. More of them, better equipped. Weapons designed specifically for enhanced threats. They formed a perimeter, professional, disciplined, not attacking, just containing. "Stand down," their leader ordered. "You're in violation of approximately 40 different federal statutes. Surrender now, and You can what?" Metro Man looked at him. "Arrest me based on which law? I haven't hurt anyone, haven't stolen anything. Just made public what they were trying to hide. You've compromised secure systems, distributed classified information, endangered corporate assets. I've exposed systematic corruption. There's a difference. That's for courts to decide. Courts they control." Metro Man gestured at the servers, at the data still broadcasting upstairs. "This is what they bury. This is what they spend millions protecting. Not national security, not public safety. Just profit margins and liability exposure." Homelander laughed, sharp, broken. "You think this matters? You think showing them data changes anything? They'll spin it. They'll explain it. They'll make me the victim and you the terrorist, and in 6 months nobody will remember except as the story Vought tells them." "Maybe," Metro Man said. "But they'll remember Thursday. They'll remember tonight. They'll remember watching you fail to stop me twice. That's not something spin can erase. I'm Homelander." The scream echoed through the server farm, desperate. "I'm the strongest, You're not." Metro Man's voice cut through the hysteria. Cold. Final. "You never were. You just never met anyone who could prove it." The words landed like physical blows. Homelander's expression cycled through rage to denial to something approaching comprehension. The fundamental understanding that power he'd built his identity on was relative, conditional, not absolute. He collapsed. Not physically, psychologically, sank to his knees, cape pooling around him. Perfect costume suddenly looking like a child's dress-up clothes on someone who'd just realized the game was over. Security didn't know how to process it. Their protocols didn't cover Homelander breaking down. Didn't cover their primary asset having an identity crisis in sub-level 5, while evidence of corporate malfeasance broadcast to the world above. Metro Man walked past them. Past Homelander. Past the servers and the techs. And the woman in the expensive suit who was probably already calculating her severance package. He walked to the wall, the same one he'd entered through. "Where are you going?" Ashley Barrett's voice from behind. She'd arrived at some point. Looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. "You can't just leave. You can't just blow up everything and walk away." "I'm not blowing up everything. I'm blowing up your everything. There's a difference. People will get hurt. Employees who did nothing wrong. Communities that depend on Vought's infrastructure. You're not thinking about consequences. I'm thinking about different consequences. The kind that come from letting systems like this operate unchecked. You self-righteous... She stopped, collected herself. Fine. You win. You exposed us. You humiliated Homelander. You burned our credibility. Congratulations. Now what you going to rebuild? Going to fill the void? Or just leave wreckage and feel good about yourself? Metro Man looked at her. At the exhaustion and anger and genuine fear underneath the professional facade. I'm not here to rebuild. I'm here to stop pretending broken systems are working. What comes next isn't my responsibility. It's yours and theirs. He gestured upward, at the gala guests, at the city beyond. They get to decide what they build instead. That's naive. That's freedom. He walked through the wall. Left Ashley standing in the server farm. Left Homelander on his knees. Left security with no clear target and no protocol for what to do when everything they were protecting had already fallen apart. Metro Man flew up the outside of Vought Tower. Could see the gala level through the windows. Mass exodus. Partnerships dissolving in real time. The infrastructure of power, recognizing when the foundation had cracked beyond repair. He flew higher. Past the tower, past the gala, up into the night sky over Manhattan. From up here, the city looked almost peaceful. Millions of people living their lives. Unaware or uncaring or processing the fact that something they'd been told was permanent had just proven temporary. His phone buzzed. Huey again. Holy shit, did you really just... Yes. The footage is everywhere. Every major network, social media, international news. Vaught's trying to claim it's fake, but nobody's buying it because it came from their own servers through their own broadcast infrastructure. Good. Good, that's Metro Man. You just declared war on the most powerful corporation in America. No, I just stopped letting them pretend they weren't already at war with everyone else. Silence on the line. Then, what now? Now they scramble. Now the machinery breaks down. Now people decide if they want to rebuild the same system or try something different. And you, Metro Man, looked at the city. At Vought Tower with its lights and chaos and collapsing infrastructure. At the evidence still broadcasting. At the truth that couldn't be buried anymore. I leave, he said, before they try to make me the next thing people build systems around. Just like that. Just like that. He ended the call, turned off the phone, dropped it into the night sky. Didn't watch it fall. Below him, Manhattan processed what had just happened. News vans converging. Emergency services responding to something that wasn't quite an emergency, but wasn't quite not one either. The kind of event that didn't fit existing categories. Metro Man flew north, not to another rooftop, not to another city, just away, toward dark sky and empty space, and the kind of distance that made it clear this chapter was finished. He'd done what he came to do. Broken the cage, exposed the bars, proven that systems built on control and narrative and manufactured consent could be disrupted by someone who refused to be controlled or narrated or manufactured. What happened next wasn't his problem. The world would either learn from tonight or repeat the same mistakes with different names and better PR. Either way, Metro Man wouldn't be there to watch. He'd already played that role. Already been the symbol people projected their needs onto. Already learned that being worshipped was just another kind of cage. This time he'd make sure they couldn't build one around him. The city lights faded behind him. Ahead, darkness and possibility, and the freedom that came from refusing every script people tried to write. Metro Man flew into it without looking back. Behind him, Vought Tower stood against the Manhattan skyline. Wounded, exposed, still standing but no longer untouchable. And inside, Homelander knelt in a server farm surrounded by evidence of what he'd always been finally understanding, that strength meant nothing if you built it on lies. The broadcast continued through the night. The consequences were just beginning. The city didn't burn. That would have been simpler, cleaner. A clear before and after that people could point to and say, this is when everything changed. Instead, it fragmented. 3 days after the Galavot's stock had crashed, recovered, partially crashed again. Trading halted twice, resumed under emergency SEC oversight. The pattern didn't resolve, just oscillated. Markets processing information they didn't know how to value. 4 days after Homelander hadn't been seen publicly. Vought released a statement about medical leave and personal time. Ashley Barrett did 17 interviews explaining that even heroes needed rest. Nobody believed her, but everyone reported it anyway, because what else was there to report when the story didn't have an ending yet? 5 days after the lawsuit started. Class actions, individual claims, wrongful death, negligence, fraud. Lawyers emerging from every firm in every city smelling blood and water that Vaught's legal team couldn't contain anymore because there were too many wounds and not enough fingers for the holes in the dam. 6 days after Congress announced hearings, Vaught's CEO testified. Took the fifth on 43 questions, answered 6 with variations of, "We're conducting internal reviews." The hearing accomplished nothing except proving that political oversight meant asking questions everyone already knew the answers to. 7 days after someone burned down a Vought recruiting center in Baltimore. Nobody died, but the message was clear. Some people had decided exposure meant permission for violence. Metro Man watched it all from a distance. Not physically distant. He was still in the city, just removed from the mechanisms, trying to process what he'd done. He'd found an abandoned building in the Bronx, squatted there like any other person without an address. Nobody looked for powerful beings in places where powerful beings weren't supposed to exist. His phone was gone. Huey had his number but no way to reach him. The boys had stopped calling anyway. Their work was done. Evidence was public. Vought was bleeding. What they did with that was their business now. Metro Man spent the days reading. Newspapers, online coverage, social media reactions, the full spectrum of how people processed truth when truth arrived faster than their frameworks could accommodate it. Some people called him a hero. Said he'd done what nobody else could. Started petitions for him to replace the 7. To start a new team. To be the real protector Vought had only pretended to provide. Some people called him a terrorist. Said he'd destroyed American infrastructure, endangered corporate stability, created chaos that would take years to repair. Demanded his arrest for economic sabotage and compromising national security assets. Most people just argued. Fought in comment sections and cable news panels about what it all meant. Whether Vought deserved exposure or if Metro Man had overstepped. Whether heroes should exist at all or if the whole concept was corrupted beyond salvation. The arguments went in circles. Nobody convinced anyone. The city just got louder while staying fundamentally the same. On day 8, Billy Butcher found him. Showed up at the abandoned building like he'd known exactly where to look. Probably had. Butcher was good at finding people who didn't want to be found. Cozy, Butcher said, looking around the empty space. Very minimalist. Very, I'm too good for actual shelter. How did you find me? Metro Man asked. Process of elimination. You're not staying at hotels. Not using credit cards. Not showing up on any surveillance. That leaves abandoned buildings. And you don't strike me as the subway tunnel type. Butcher pulled a flask from his coat, took a drink. So, you proud of yourself? Should I be? That's what I'm asking. You got what you wanted? Vaught's bleeding, Homelander's broken. Truth's out there for anyone who wants to see it. Victory lap time. Metro Man looked out the broken window at the city. This doesn't feel like victory. That's because it isn't. That's what I came to tell you. Butcher moved closer. You know what happened yesterday. Woman in Queens got attacked. 3 guys said it was payback for what Vought did to their neighborhood. Except she didn't work for Vought, just worked near their regional office. Wrong place, wrong association. I didn't tell anyone to do that. No, but you cracked the dam. Can't control where the water goes after. Butcher took another drink. Baltimore Center burned. Jersey facility got vandalized. 2 more in other states. People are angry, and anger doesn't read fine print about who deserves what. So I should have left everything alone. Let Vought keep operating. Didn't say that. Just said there's a cost. You wanted to break cages. Congratulations. Now people outside the cages are getting bit by what was locked inside. Metro Man turned from the window. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you did. Not the hero version, the actual version. Butcher moved to the other window, looked out at the same city from a different angle. Vaught's not dead. They're wounded. Different. That woman they had running crisis management, Ashley, she quit. Whole PR department restructured. New CEO announced this morning. Fresh face, clean record. Promise of reform and accountability. That's progress. That's rebranding. They're not going anywhere. Too big. Too connected. Too much infrastructure that people actually depend on whether they like it or not. You didn't kill them. You just forced them to molt. Better than nothing, is it? Butcher's voice carried an edge that wasn't quite anger. New CEO's first act was announcing a memorial fund for victims of enhanced individual incidents. Guess who gets classified as an enhanced individual incident? You. The data you exposed. The systems you broke. They're already spinning it. Already making themselves the victims of your extremism. Metro Man felt something cold settle in his chest. Not surprise. Just confirmation of what he'd suspected. They're using what I did against me, and everyone like you. Any soup who operates outside their control is now a potential Metro Man, a potential threat to stability. They're pushing legislation, enhanced individual registration, mandatory corporate partnerships, all framed as public safety measures to prevent another incident. Butcher laughed, bitter. You wanted to break their cage. They're using the broken bars to build a bigger one. The abandoned building felt smaller, colder. Metro Man looked at his hands, at the power that had accomplished everything and nothing. What about Homelander? He asked. Still gone. Still on medical leave. Rumors are he's in some Vought facility upstate, getting therapy or reconditioning or whatever they do when their prize asset has an identity crisis. Butcher finished his flask. But here's the thing. The public's already forgetting, already moving on to the next outrage. Give it a month, they'll remember Homelander as he was, not as he is. Vaught's counting on that. So nothing changed. Plenty changed. Just not in the direction you were aiming. Butcher pocketed the flask. Starlight quit the Seven. Public announcement. Said she couldn't work for an organization built on lies. She's trying to do independent hero work now. No corporate backing. Gets attacked daily for abandoning her responsibilities. And Huey thinks you're a hero. Still, even after everything. Kid's got hope I never had. Butcher moved toward the door, stopped. But he also asked me to tell you something. He said thank you for trying, for caring enough to try, even if it didn't work perfect. Tell him I'm sorry it wasn't enough. It never is. That's what people like Huey don't understand yet. That's what you're starting to figure out. Butcher opened the door. You going to stick around? Keep fighting, try to finish what you started. No, smart. Nothing left to finish anyway. Just repetition. Vought rebuilding. You tearing down, them rebuilding again. Cycle without end until someone gets killed and becomes the excuse for worse controls. Butcher paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, You did more damage than anyone else ever has. Made them bleed. Made them scared. That counts for something, even if it doesn't count for everything. He left, door closing with an echo that seemed to carry through the entire empty building. Metro Man stood alone in the space. Listened to the city, to sirens and traffic and millions of people living in the aftermath of truth that hadn't set them free, just rearranged the bars. He'd known this was possible, had suspected it was probable. But knowing and experiencing were different. Suspicion and confirmation carried different weights. The evidence was public. Homelander was broken. Vought was wounded. And the world was already adapting. Already processing the disruption into new forms of the same control. Different faces, different language. Same essential structure. Metro Man walked to the broken window. Looked at Manhattan's skyline. At Vought Tower still standing. Smaller somehow, less imposing. But still there. Still operational. Still serving the function it had always served, even if the branding had changed. He'd broken the cage. They'd built a new one, bigger, more sophisticated, justified by his breaking the old one. Butcher was right. There was no finishing this, no final victory, just endless cycles of exposure and adaptation, and people like Huey hoping the next attempt would be the one that actually changed everything. Metro Man had tried that hope once, in another city, with another name. It hadn't worked there either. Some systems didn't break, they just evolved. Got better at hiding, better at justifying, better at making the cage look like something other than what it was. The sun set over the city. Day 8 became Day 9. Vaught's new CEO did an interview. Promised transparency and reform, and all the words that meant nothing except continuation with better optics. Metro Man watched it on a phone he'd borrowed from a library. Watched the performance, the calculated humility. The promise that this time would be different. It wouldn't be. It never was. But people would believe it anyway. Because believing was easier than accepting that some problems didn't have heroes who could solve them. The broadcast ended. Metro Man returned the phone. Walked out of the library into a city that had already moved on to tomorrow's crisis, while yesterday's revelations became just more noise in the feed. He'd done what he came to do. Exposed what needed exposing. Broken what needed breaking. The fact that it wasn't enough didn't change that he'd tried. The fact that Vought survived didn't change that he'd hurt them. The fact that the cage rebuilt didn't change that he'd proven it could be broken. It just meant he understood now what he'd always suspected. There were no heroes. Just people doing what they could with what they had. And sometimes what they could do wasn't enough to change the systems that needed changing. Sometimes the best you could manage was proving the system could bleed. Metro Man walked through the Bronx streets. Invisible among people who didn't look up. Who didn't expect powerful beings to walk among them like equals. Tomorrow he'd leave. Not because there wasn't more to do. Because more to do meant becoming what he'd refused to be. Meant staying and fighting, and becoming the next thing people built cages around. He'd broken free once. Wouldn't let them cage him again, even if that meant walking away from people who needed someone to break cages for them. Even if that meant leaving Huey's hope unanswered. Even if that meant Vought won by outlasting rather than defeating. The city moved through its evening, adapting, processing, surviving. Metro Man moved with it. One more person in millions. One more story that would become legend, and then myth, and then forgotten. Except for the people who remembered what he'd proven. That power could be challenged. That control could be disrupted. That truth could be forced into light. Even if light didn't change everything. At least it changed something. And sometimes something was all anyone could manage. That's a I'm not the answer to anyone's problems, including yours. The 3 dots stayed longer this time. Finally. Fair enough. Thanks for the chaos. It mattered. Did it? Ask me in a year. Metro Man turned the phone off. Dropped it in a trash can. walked away from the last connection to people who still thought heroes were the solution instead of part of the problem. He flew one more time before leaving. Not high, not far. Just a circuit around Manhattan, seeing it from the air one last time. Vought Tower still standing. The Seven's promotional images still on billboards. Ashley Barrett's face on a news screen announcing another reform initiative. The machinery adapting, surviving, continuing. Nothing had ended. Nothing had been solved. Just exposed. Just wounded. Just forced to acknowledge that absolute control was an illusion. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it wasn't. Metro Man didn't know anymore. What he knew was that staying meant letting people decide what he was, what he represented, what he should do next. And he'd spent too much of his life letting other people write his script. He descended in Times Square. Not the tourist center, the edges, where people passed without paying attention to each other. Where someone in jeans and a jacket was just another face in millions. There was a news screen above him. Large, bright, currently showing footage from the gala. The moment he'd broadcast Vaught's data. The moment Homelander had collapsed. The moment everything had fragmented. A crowd had gathered, watching, discussing, arguing about what it meant. Metro Man stood among them, listened. He went too far, someone said. You can't just destroy institutions like that. People depend on them. He didn't destroy anything. He exposed what was already broken. Same thing. Now we have chaos instead of order. We had the illusion of order. That's worse. Is it my kids looked up to Homelander? Had his poster on their wall. Now what do I tell them? That heroes are fake, that power corrupts. They're 8 years old. They don't need that cynicism. They need truth. They need hope. The argument continued. Would continue. Metro Man had heard variations of it for 9 days. Would hear variations of it for years probably, in other cities. Other contexts. The same essential disagreement about whether exposure helped or hurt. He didn't have an answer. Wasn't sure anyone did. What he had was a choice. Stay and become the next symbol. The next thing people projected their needs onto. The next cage dressed up as liberation. Or leave. Let them figure it out. Let them build whatever came next without making him the foundation. Metro Man chose leaving. He walked away from the crowd. Away from Times Square. Away from the screens showing his actions on repeat. Walked until the streets became quieter, less dense. Until Manhattan gave way to the edges where the city blurred into something else. He found a place where he could be alone. An old pier, abandoned, overlooking water that reflected the skyline without judgment. Metro Man pulled out a piece of paper. He'd written something earlier. Not a speech, not a manifesto, just words, simple ones, the kind that couldn't be spun or misinterpreted or turned into marketing. He left the paper on the pier, weighted down with a rock, where someone would find it, where it would end up online, where people would discuss what it meant and argue about whether he was right or wrong or somewhere in between. The paper said, "You don't need heroes. You never did. What you need is accountability, systems that work without requiring someone powerful to enforce them, truth that doesn't depend on someone brave enough to expose it, justice that exists because you built it, not because someone swooped in to deliver it. I broke what needed breaking. I showed what needed showing. What happens next is your choice. Build something better. Build something worse. Build the same thing with different names. Just don't build it around me. I'm done being what other people need me to be. You should be too." Someone who was Metro Man for a while. He didn't sign it. Didn't need to. People would know who wrote it, or they wouldn't. Either way, the words stood on their own. Metro Man flew north. Away from Manhattan, away from Vought Tower and Times Square and all the infrastructure of a city that had already moved on to processing him as content rather than person. He flew until the lights faded, until the noise became quiet, until the only thing around him was darkness and sky, and the freedom that came from refusing every script anyone tried to write. Behind him, the city continued, adapted, survived, with or without him. In sub-level 5, technicians rebuilt servers. On the 40th floor, Vought executives planned strategies. In conference rooms and legal offices and newsrooms, people discussed what it all meant and what should happen next. Homelander was still gone. Still in whatever facility Vought used to repair broken assets. Still trying to understand what it meant that strength hadn't been enough. Starlight was still trying to be a hero without corporate backing. Still getting attacked for abandoning the Seven. Still believing that individual action could change systems built to resist change. The boys were still working, still documenting, still hoping that the next exposure would be the one that actually mattered. And Metro Man was gone, flying north through darkness, toward nothing in particular, away from everything that tried to turn him into something he'd already refused to be. The note on the pier stayed weighted under its rock through the night. Someone found it in the morning, photographed it, posted it online. Within hours, it had been shared 10,000 times. Within days, 1,000,000. People argued about what it meant. Whether he was right to leave, whether abandoning the city made him a coward or a realist, whether his message was inspirational or cynical. The arguments went in circles. Convinced nobody. Changed nothing except adding more noise to the discourse. But some people read the words and understood. Not the majority, not even a significant minority. Just enough. Enough to realize that waiting for heroes meant staying helpless. That building better systems required participation, not spectating. That change came from many people doing small things, not one person doing everything. It wasn't a revolution. Wasn't a movement. Just a shift. Small. Barely noticeable. The kind of change that happened in individuals rather than crowds. Maybe it was enough. Maybe it wasn't. Metro Man didn't stay to find out. He flew until morning. Until the sun rose over landscape that had no name and no significance. Until he found a place that didn't need heroes, because it had never expected them. He landed in a field. Empty. Quiet. Somewhere in upstate New York or Vermont or maybe Canada, somewhere that didn't matter, because geographic location was less important than emotional distance. Metro Man stood in the field and felt the absence of cameras, the absence of expectations, the absence of people trying to make him into something that served their needs instead of his own. It felt like freedom, not the kind that came from power, the kind that came from walking away from power when everyone else wanted you to stay. He'd been Metro Man for a while, had been Music Man before that, had been a child called something else before either name made sense. Now he could be nothing. Nobody. Just existence without definition, without purpose assigned by others. The field stretched out in all directions, empty, available, ready for whatever came next. Metro Man didn't know what came next, didn't need to know. Knowing meant planning, and planning meant script, and script meant cage. He'd broken enough cages, for himself and for others. Now he'd see what life looked like without them. The sun rose higher, the field stayed empty, and somewhere far away, a city continued processing his absence into just another story. Metro Man didn't look back. There was nothing behind him that needed watching anymore. Metro Man left the city on day 9. Not because the work was finished, because staying meant becoming the next thing people needed saving from. He'd seen it already. The petitions, the movements, people organizing around the idea of Metro Man as the real hero. The genuine protector. The one who'd proven what actual power looked like when it refused to be corrupted. They were building a cage, Didn't realize that's what they were doing. Thought they were creating support, creating a movement, creating something better than Vaught. But every movement needed a leader. Every support structure needed someone to support. And Metro Man had played that role before, knew exactly where it ended. He spent his last morning in the city at a place that had mattered once. The construction site where he'd saved 6 workers while the 7 positioned for cameras. The building was finished now. Workers gone. Scaffolding removed. Just another tower in a city full of towers. Nobody recognized him. He'd stopped wearing the costume. Just jeans and a jacket borrowed from a donation bin. Regular clothes for someone who'd decided being regular was the only defense against worship. His phone buzzed. The library phone he'd kept. One last message. Unknown number, but he knew who it was from the phrasing. Leaving without saying goodbye, that's cold. B, Metro Man typed back. Goodbyes imply we're done. This isn't done. Just changing participants. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Huey wanted me to ask if you'd stay, help rebuild. Do it right this time. Can't rebuild what people don't want to let go of. That's a no. 3 months after Metro Man disappeared, an album dropped. Not announced, not promoted, just appeared on streaming platforms at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Artist name Music Man. Album title Someone Who Was. The first review appeared 6 hours later. Rolling Stone's headline read, Music Man's debut, proof that superpowers don't include musical talent. Pitchfork gave it a 2.4. Technically competent but emotionally vacant. Like listening to someone who learned music theory but never understood why music matters. The tracks were simple. Acoustic guitar, plain vocals, songs about cages and cities, and choices nobody understood until they'd already made them. Nothing innovative, nothing radio-ready, nothing that would convince anyone that Music Man had a future in the industry. By Thursday, it was trending, not because it was good, because people wanted to know if it was really him. If Metro Man had actually recorded an album before vanishing. If this was his final message or an elaborate hoax. The metadata offered no answers. Recorded in various locations, produced by Anonymous. Copyright held by an LLC that didn't exist 3 months ago and had no physical address. Vaught's PR team issued a statement. We have no knowledge of this recording and cannot verify its authenticity. Any attempt to profit from Metro Man's image without authorization will be pursued legally. The statement made it number 1. By Friday, Someone Who Was had hit the top of every chart. Not every music chart, every chart. Streaming, downloads, physical copies that hadn't been manufactured yet but were pre-ordered by people who wanted proof they'd been there when it happened. Critics kept reviewing it poorly, kept calling it mediocre, kept rating it below albums that had actual musical merit. Nobody cared. Fan theories multiplied. The lyrics were coded messages. The guitar work contained hidden frequencies. The timing between tracks spelled out coordinates. People found patterns that weren't there, and meaning in randomness and proof that Metro Man was watching, even if he'd claimed he was leaving. Someone started a petition. Bring back Metro Man. Got 2 million signatures in a week. The petition didn't specify what bringing him back meant or who had the authority to do it. Just demanded his return because his absence felt like abandonment. Think pieces appeared. What Music Man's album tells us about heroism in the modern age. The semiotics of mediocre music, why Metro Man's failure matters. Option C, and the refusal of greatness. None of them agreed on what the album meant. All of them agreed it mattered. A tribute concert was announced. Artists covering Music Man's songs. Proceeds going to enhanced individual support services. Tickets sold out in 14 minutes. The organizers announced they'd donate profits to help soups operate independently from corporate control. Metro Man wasn't mentioned in the promotional materials. Music Man was. The distinction seemed important to the organizers, if nobody else. Bootleg merchandise appeared. T-shirts with lyrics, posters with album art. Someone made a hologram performance that toured college campuses. The hologram looked nothing like Metro Man and sang better than the album. Nobody seemed to notice the discrepancy. Vought pivoted. Instead of fighting the album, they embraced it. Official Music Man collection launched through their merchandising division. Vinyl reissues, deluxe editions, commentary from industry experts who'd never met Music Man but had opinions about his artistic vision. Ashley Barrett did an interview, explained that Vought had always supported artistic expression, that they were proud someone they'd briefly worked with had found creative outlets, that they bore no ill will toward Metro Man and hoped he found peace wherever he'd gone. The interviewer asked if she'd heard the album. Parts of it, Ashley said. It's very earnest. The clip became a meme. Very earnest became shorthand for bad, but we're pretending it matters. The album stayed #1 for 6 weeks. Dropped to #3. Climbed back to #2. Settled into the top 10, where it remained sustained by people who'd never listened to it, but liked having it in their library as proof of something they couldn't quite articulate. Music critics stopped reviewing it, started treating it as cultural phenomenon rather than musical artifact. Wrote articles about why terrible art sometimes mattered more than good art. Why authenticity trumped competence. Why people needed symbols even when the symbol specifically asked not to be symbols. A documentary was announced. Someone Who Was the Music Man story. Interviews with people who'd never met him. Experts analyzing lyrics. Footage from the Vought incidents edited to sync with the album's tempo. Metro Man wasn't consulted, wasn't contacted. Probably didn't know the documentary existed. Somewhere in an empty field or a quiet town or a place that had no name worth mentioning. Someone who used to be called several things was living a life that nobody wrote articles about. The album kept selling, kept trending, kept meaning different things to different people who needed it to mean something, because accepting that it was just mediocre music by someone who'd wanted to be left alone didn't fit the narrative they'd built. The cage had rebuilt itself. Different bars, same essential structure. Instead of making Metro Man a hero, they'd made Music Man an artist. Instead of demanding he save them, they demanded he inspire them. Same need, different uniform. And somewhere far from streaming platforms and think pieces and tribute concerts. Someone who'd broken one cage and walked into another without realizing it lived a life that had nothing to do with what people were buying. The album played on repeat in coffee shops and gyms and anywhere that needed background noise, that felt meaningful without requiring attention. Nobody really listened to it. Everyone had an opinion about it. And somewhere that wasn't anywhere people were looking, someone who used to answer to names other people gave him was finally learning what it meant to exist without them. The album hit #1 again 3 months later. Anniversary surge. People remembered, bought it again, gave it to friends who didn't want it. The cycle continued, would continue, because people needed something to project meaning onto, and Music Man's absence made him the perfect screen. He'd quit being a hero, quit being a symbol, quit being what other people needed. But you couldn't quit being what people decided to make you when you weren't there to stop them. The album played on. The debates continued, the meaning multiplied, and somewhere else, someone hummed a different tune. One that nobody would ever hear or analyze or turn into merchandise. That version was better. But it was his. And that made it worthless to everyone except the person singing it. The fandom cage had replaced the hero cage. Different bars, better lighting, same essential trap. But the person it was built for wasn't inside it anymore. And that perhaps was its own kind of victory, even if nobody was there to witness it. What happens when a superhuman who loves art steps into a violent, image-obsessed world of superheroes Metro Man an iconic figure from Megamind, never wanted to be a god or a symbol. What he truly wanted was something far simpler: to become a genuine musical artist. But the power he possesses is too great to allow him to live honestly as himself. When he is cast into a world that worships appearances and manufactured heroism, his life becomes even more suffocating. To Vought, International Metro Man is nothing more than a product, a tool to boost public trust and reinforce their corporate mythology. To Homelander, he is a potential rival, a threat to an untouchable position built on fear, control, and spectacle. And yet Metro Man has no interest in glory, dominance, or applause. In the end, he fights not for power, not for control, but for the right to walk away. He chooses to follow his heart and immerse himself in art, finally rejecting the role the world tried to force upon him. Even so, in a bitter twist, the masters of media manipulation at Vought still find a way to exploit him, proving that in a world addicted to symbols, even freedom can be monetized.